Coming up on this week's show, Brandilyn has got some audiobook recommendations, plus we recap our New York theater trip.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode 143 of the Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And I'm Will from WillKnaus.com. This week's episode is brought to you in part by listeners just like you. We will have more information on how you can help support this show in just a few moments. Welcome everyone. I hope you had a fantastic June, a wonderful Pride Month. I hope you had lots of fun and that you read lots of great books. I did not. My reading fell off for various reasons. I didn't get a lot read during the month of June, but that usually happens during the summer months for me personally. But enough about me. Hi.
Hello.
A lot has gone on since we have talked to our listeners.
That's right, because we bonus recorded 2 weeks ago now because we were away for our theater trip, which was awesome. And we will be talking about a little bit later on. Somehow I actually managed to write during vacation, which was pretty amazing. I think I wrote 3 of the days that we were gone. And yesterday actually had my biggest writing day ever with like 6,400 words. It was crazy. I love dictation. It makes so many things possible. And you started a class.
I did.
Which is very cool. You could tell us about that maybe a little later after you've completed it?
Possibly.
I'll goad him into talking about the class later because it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So this week, well, actually over the weekend, actually, Coastal Magic revealed its featured author lists for 2019. As you know, we are a featured quote-unquote blogger for Coastal Magic, and we're looking forward to unveiling all kinds of fun stuff over the coming months. But in terms of the featured authors that got revealed, there are so many gay romance favorites here. We've got Brew Baker, Morgan Bryce, Charlie Cochet, Poppy Dennison, Hank Edwards, Kieran Kelly, Amy Lane, Lucy Lennox, Z.A. Maxfield, Terry Michaels, Victoria Sue, and Damon Suede. That's a good lineup.
Now, registration opened up on the 1st of July, and since Coastal Magic is kind of a smallish...
very casual, I would say.
Yeah, the attendee cap is around 300, so you might want to register sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. Now, this takes place in Daytona Beach, February 28th through March 3rd of 2019. Mardi Gras also happens to be starting up that same weekend, so apparently there's going to be a lot of purple, gold, and green around, including a Mardi Gras-themed welcome mingle on Thursday. There'll be multiple chances to meet and greet your favorite authors. Damon Suede will have his 2019 edition of Cinema Craptastique, and you really haven't had some fun until you've watched him critique a crazy bad film. There's lunch with an author, there's a book sale and signing, and lots of panel discussions. So it's going to be a pretty fabulous weekend.
Next week, Jennifer Morris, she is the mastermind behind Coastal Magic. She'll be here to talk to us more about next year's convention.
Absolutely. And we got links in the show notes to the author reveal, the registration page, and the general Coastal Magic page at coastalmagicconvention.com.
In the Hockey Player's Heart, the feel-good gay romance by Jeff Adams and Will Knaus, hockey star Caleb Carter returns to his hometown to recover from an injury. He never expects to run into his one-time crush at a grade school fundraiser. Seeing Aaron Price hits him hard, like being checked into the boards. The attraction is still there, even after all these years, and Caleb decides to make a play for the school teacher. You miss 100% of the shots you never take, right? Aaron has been burned by love before and can't imagine what a celebrity like Caleb could possibly see in a guy like him. Their differences are just too great. But as Aaron spends more time with Caleb, he begins to wonder if he might have what it takes to win the Hockey Player's Heart. Get The Hockey Player's Heart in ebook, paperback, or as an audiobook performed by me, Vince Sterling, wherever you buy books.
So last week we headed to New York for our annual theater trip / seeing a bunch of theater for my birthday / being in New York for Pride. It was a good trip this year. We picked some good stuff, I think.
This year's theatrical excursion ended up having a theme. We didn't do it on purpose, but this is how it actually worked out. This year's theme was gay/revival, with the sub-themes being nudity and one-act plays.
Oh, I didn't know we had a sub-theme, but yes, you're kind of right about that.
Quickly, let's see. We saw Matt Bomer's butt.
Yes.
We saw all of Lee Pace, and the three terrific actors. We saw all they had to offer in the play Afterglow.
Mm-hmm. And we did.
Shall we start with the first play we watched when we arrived in New York City?
We did the entire day on Wednesday seeing the 8-hour epic that is Angels in America.
Now, for those of you who don't know or have been living under a rock for like 25 years, Angels in America is by Tony Kushner, and it is an epic play that follows a cast of characters who are living in New York during the height of the AIDS crisis. And it's... While Jeff is right, it is incredibly long if you choose to see the entire cycle. The play is rather intimate, is how I would describe it, because it goes into such personal detail about what these various characters are going through and experiencing. The play is... The cycle is essentially split into two different plays. There's Millennium Approaches and then Perestroika. We went on a Wednesday, which means we saw the first play for the matinee and then the second play in the evening. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who have don't know it very well or have never seen a production of Angels in America, there was the HBO miniseries from probably almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah, 10, maybe 15 even now.
The HBO miniseries very closely sticks to the source material. So if you watched the HBO miniseries, then you have a pretty good idea of what Angels in America is all about. Now, that being said, sitting on your butt for 8 hours wasn't a hardship because the play is that good and that engrossing. This particular revival, this Broadway revival, was wonderfully cast. Really quickly, there was a off-Broadway revival. How long ago was that now?
It was in 2010. In
2010, Jeff and I went and saw that one as well. That was an excellent revival, and I thought this particular Broadway revival was excellent as well. Mm-hmm. I think what it proves is that the material is exceptional and that there are many different ways to interpret it.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, and I think as people interpret it in different time frames, it changes a little bit. Like I felt differently seeing it this time than I did in 2010 because our times have changed so much in the intervening 8 years in terms of the political landscape, the equality landscape. It's different now. And so I relate to the play slightly differently. And I think that feeds into the direction of the actors as well. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
You would agree with that. I thought the whole thing was exceptional. Andrew Garfield and Nathan Lane both won Tonys for this. It was a whole different look at Andrew Garfield. You've never seen him portray anything like this, as he played Prior Walter, who discovers early in the play that he has become infected and has AIDS, and he goes through this sickness, and he is told by this angel that he's a prophet. Everything that he goes through is just amazing, and he played it so well. And Nathan Lane is Roy Cohn, who, of course, was a very evil character in our nation's history. It was a revelation for Nathan Lane. He mentioned it in his Tony speech that he really felt that he'd evolved as an actor, and I would agree with that 100%. That he's not just Nathan Lane on stage in this role. But I was blown away by this production and the whole way they do the angel and move the angel across the stage in this combination of of puppetry and actor and a whole bunch of people working together, and some choreography was just epic. If I lived in New York, I'd probably try to go see this again because this closes July 15th.
Moving on.
Next up, we saw a ton of amazing actors in The Boys in the Band.
Now, this past month in our Patreon bonus episode, Jeff and I took a look at the movie version of Boys in the Band, and we also talked about the documentary concerning Boys in the Band called Making the Boys. And I sort of shared my thoughts about the play and the movie and sort of everything that went into making both of them. I've never actually seen a production of Boys in the Band on stage, so this was a whole lot of fun. Real quickly to sum up what the Boys in the Band is all about. The character Michael has a super cute little apartment in New York City, and he is throwing a birthday party for his friend Harold, and all of their friends sort of assemble for one interesting, revelatory evening that takes an interesting turn halfway through. It's this play. I enjoy the play. The play has a I think personally, I think it's a lot of people have very strong feelings for Boys in the Band, pro and against. We talked about that a little bit in our bonus episode as well. I think some of the hate that the play has received over the decades is undeserved. Real quickly, the history of Boys in the Band is that it was the very first play that took an open and honest look at the lives of gay men, and that first appeared off-Broadway in 1968, the year before Stonewall, and the play was a total smash hit. And a year later, of course, the Stonewall riots happened. And then public sentiment sort of took a sharp turn against the play because I think the popular opinion was that the play was immediately dated now, and it wasn't a shiny, happy example of what gay life should be. It wasn't proper anymore. When it first premiered, it was all about representation, and everyone celebrated that. After Stonewall, it was looked down on as if the characters, as if we should be ashamed of what the characters in the play experience. I don't feel that way at all, and I think this particular production shows us once again why this play was so very important. It also marks the very first time that the play has appeared on Broadway, and it also marks the very first time that the entire cast is populated by out gay performers. So it's pretty remarkable. I enjoyed this particular production very, very much. It is headlined by Jim Parsons, Zachary Quinto, and Matt Bomer, who we spoke about previously.
Yes, getting to see his butt.
So what did you think of Boys in the Band?
I liked it. As with you, it was the first time that I had seen it live on stage. This is a transformed version of the show. It is only one act, and it used to be two. It was revised to put it on Broadway. So this met our gay and our one act criteria and nudity criteria for our trip. I think in some ways the elements of this play could still happen today, depending on the circle and of people that you know and where you might live in this country. From a straight up performance production standpoint, I thought Zachary Quinto was a revolution. It was just a revelation in this show. He is not what you think of Zachary Quinto at all. This is 180 degrees from any role I've seen him play. He was biting. He was funny. He just infused his character with such a. I don't even have the adjective for it. I was very impressed with him and the rest of the cast too, but him in particular stuck out for me here.
Mm-hmm. I think what was interesting when I first heard of the casting of this particular production when it was announced that Jim Parsons was going to be playing the lead role of Michael. I was a little... I tried to go into it with an open mind. I don't think Jim Parsons, who is sort of essentially the embodiment of the everyday nice guy. Incidentally, Jim actually did a Broadway production a couple of seasons ago of Harvey, which the movie version starred Jimmy Stewart, who was the absolute epitome of the everyday nice guy. That was, who he was. So having nice guy Jim Parsons portray Michael, who is very acerbic, kind of bitchy, halfway through the play, the drama that ensues depends upon Michael being a very mean drunk, which I think Jim Parsons was able to pull off to a certain extent. I think it's a sort of the softer side of this particular character. I think what Jim actually dialed into really, really well is we now finally understand why this particular group of men are friends. I think that there's... even though none of the dialogue has changed, and Michael is still very bitchy, I think there is sort of an underlying softness and understanding to his performance. The only problem is at the very end of the play, after all of the drama has ensued and all of his friends have left for the evening, Michael kind of turns to his friend Donald and has a really catastrophic breakdown when he realizes what he did. In this particular production, it's more like Michael has a mild panic attack. So I don't think the weight of the ending is quite the same, but I still highly recommend the show. Boys in the Band is going to be closing on August 11th.
Yes, because Jim has to go back to Big Bang Theory, basically.
Yeah. So after Boys in the Band, we went to see an off Broadway play called Afterglow. Now, Afterglow was... Let me look through my little... here we go. Looking through my playbill. It was written and directed by a guy named S. Asher Gelman. And it is essentially a 3-character play. And it's about an established couple who have essentially an open relationship. And they have a menage with this charismatic younger guy. And as their friendship and relationship continues, that friendship sort of evolves into something more. In the play, it's a 1-act play. Over 90 minutes, it sort of explores when sort of a menage situation kind of evolves and morphs into polyamory, and what that means for the 3 men in this particular triad, what that means to them and their relationship. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed this play an awful lot. It's in a teeny tiny little off-Broadway space. The set and sound design is quite exceptional. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed the 3 actors an awful lot, and I think it was a pretty terrific little play. I liked it a whole lot more than I expected. This play's been running for over a year now. It keeps extending its run, and it's proven to be very, very popular with audiences. I think the salacious promise of nudity is what pulls people in, but it's actually the play itself and the performers, who are excellent, is what keeps them coming back. It's a really great show.
Yeah, it's. I settled on the description of sexy and thought-provoking. Mm-hmm. Because it is ridiculously sexy, but there's a lot to think about, too, as the play kind of unfolds and as these relationships both blossom and fracture along this 90-minute course. Afterglow theoretically is in its final extension. They have said August 12th is the end of the line. But they've said that before, so we'll see if it actually closes then or not, because it has been quite the off-Broadway phenomenon.
Yeah.
Next up, Tony-winning revival of Once on This Island.
Now, did you think this was going to win the Tony for revival?
No.
Me neither.
And here's why. Despite the tremendous acclaim that it received when it opened, I believe in December or November, it had some space. And both Carousel and My Fair Lady opened late in the season to huge acclaim and box office. And I think it caught a lot of other professional predictors off guard too, because most of them were like, who's going to win, Carousel or My Fair Lady?
Exactly.
And then Once on This Island came up and took it. And having seen it, I totally get it. I totally see why.
Yes, it won for very good reason.
I kind of understood it when we saw it on the Tonys
Uh-huh.
itself and the production number that they did there. But then to go, it was amazing. This is a show that I actually saw in its original production, because I'm that old now. I can see originals and revivals now, back in the early 90s. And it's a wonderful show. It's always been magical, but there's something that was transformed here that really just, it became more than the sum of the parts that it used to be.
Really quickly, Once on This Island is a one-act.
Mm-hmm.
It's a one-act musical, and it essentially is the sort of bittersweet love story about an orphan girl who lives on this fictional island. It's sort of, the play sort of takes place on an island that's sort of in the Caribbean. There are some like Haitian influences to the story. So it's sort of set in this like Neverland. And the story concerns Timoon and how she grows up and how she falls in love with someone from essentially the right side of the tracks, and what their class differences mean to their relationship. Also, there are some island gods that figure prominently into the story, and it sort of addresses what is free will and what is essentially fate.
Yeah.
Which when I say it like that, it sounds really heavy and boring and depressing. It is not. It is wonderful and light and fun and dramatic. I think I've personally never seen a production of Once on This Island. I thought this was, number one, perfectly cast. Everyone was exceptional. And it was wonderfully staged. It was at Circle and Square Theater, and for those of you who've never been there in New York, it's essentially the stage setup is very flexible. You can do a standard proscenium production, or you can kind of do a show theater in the round style, and that's how this particular production of Once on This Island chose to do it. So essentially, the floor of the theater space is covered in sand, and the audience surrounds them, so that we're sort of an integral part of the theatrical experience.
Yeah, those first row people, their feet are in the sand. Yeah. They're sitting on the island, which was kind of fun. Mm-hmm. I was absolutely blown away by this. Alex Newell, who folks might know from Glee, he played Unique in probably, I think it was the last 2 seasons of Glee. To me, she steals the show completely. Her take on Mama Will Provide is stunning and rousing and just everything. We should note, too, that this play is kind of a story in a story as well, because these island inhabitants end up and tell the story of Timoon to a young child to distract her from a storm that's happening on the island. Leah Salonga, who finished her run in the show the weekend after we saw it, was delightful and got to sing the signature song of Human Heart. I will say that I think I could watch anything that Michael Arden chooses to direct. Because this show was amazing, and his previous revival a few seasons ago of Spring Awakening also took that show, which I'd seen the original of, and totally made it into something that was more powerful than the original. So kudos to him. Please do more. This show is on an open run, so if you're headed to New York, do check that out.
Okay, the next show that we saw was a little play called A Letter to Harvey Milk. This was something that was like sort of on my radar and I was kind of curious about. And while we were there, we decided, hey, let's check it out. Letter to Harvey Milk is a one-act play, and it essentially is about a guy named Harry. He is a retired kosher butcher, and he's kind of lonely and alone. So in order to take up some of the time in his day, he goes to the Jewish Community Center. And one day he happens to walk in the room where Barbara is holding essentially a writing class. A sparsely attended writing class. Harry ends up being her only student. And so together they sort of explore different ideas. The two of them are from two different generations. And during a writing assignment, Harry writes a letter to Harvey Milk, someone he once knew. And Barbara is sort of gobsmacked. It's like, oh my God, you knew Harvey? While Harry sort of sees Harvey as just a nice guy from the neighborhood, Barbara sees him as sort of the godlike pioneer of the gay rights movement that he was. So it's about their two different perspectives. Harvey also spends his time talking to his dead wife. Harry, I'm so sorry. Harry talks to his dead wife quite a lot during the play. It's quite funny. His wife, Franny, often chimes in with her opinions about what's going on in his life. And eventually Barbara comes out to Harry, and Harry doesn't take it particularly well. And as we learn in the play, that's for very good reason. I really enjoyed this. I've been calling it a play, but it's actually a one-act musical. Mm-hmm. A really terrific little musical, as a matter of fact. I enjoyed it, and I didn't know what to expect going in, and I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it an awful lot.
The revelations at the end of the show were amazing, how everything ended up tying together. The music was really good. Mm-hmm. The acting was really good. This was playing off-Broadway. It was actually a winner or a finalist in one of the New York New Musical festivals, which is kind of how it got onto its off-Broadway run. It actually closed on June 30th, completing its run. But I can imagine this getting, because it's a small one-act, that it can get staged around the country, hopefully, mm-hmm. As it gets kind of put out there into its licensing phase. So it was really enjoyable, and I'm glad we took the leap to go see it.
Yeah. And last but not least, we finished out our fabulous whirlwind New York theater trip with the revival of Carousel. Now, really quickly, for those of you who don't know much about Carousel, it is sort of I was actually going to say it's the redheaded stepchild of the Rodgers and Hammerstein catalog. I don't actually think that poorly of it at all. But, I mean, when you say Rodgers and Hammerstein, you usually think of, Sound of Music or South Pacific. Oklahoma. Those are sort of the tent poles of their creative work. Carousel is a unique little show. It's kind of weird. Let me try and describe it. It takes place essentially at the turn of the century, and it concerns our main character, Billy Bigelow, and his romantic interest, Julie Jordan, which, frankly, those two names get my vote for the best, most alliterative theater names ever. I love them so much. Anyway, Billy Bigelow is essentially a carnival barker for this carousel. And Julie Jordan is sort of the naive, sweet young thing that he ends up falling for and then marrying. And the play is sort of about their tumultuous relationship, where most standard musicals would probably be about the journey towards like getting married and the happily ever after. Julie and Billy meet first thing, and they get married first thing. And this is about their complicated marriage that happens afterwards. Rodgers and Hammerstein were actually very fond of tackling difficult subject matters in their plays. Let's see. While Sound of Music is, of course, considered the ultimate family musical, let's not forget they're trying to fight the Nazis. And in this particular show, in Carousel, it actually tackles the problem of domestic abuse. Billy is a complicated, angry guy, and he takes it out on other people, and he actually hits his wife. It happens off stage. It's only briefly referred to. I think Rodgers and Hammerstein were kind of not tiptoeing. I think they were very carefully addressing the issue because because a hero who's beating up his wife is not very heroic. Yeah. Anyway, so as I said, Billy's a very complicated character, and at one point he learns that Julie is pregnant. So he realizes he's got to get his act together to support his wife and his unborn child. So what does he decide to do? He decides to rob someone to get some money to help support his family. The robbery goes wrong, and Billy ends up dying. Yeah, I told you, Carousel is very unique. So Billy essentially goes to heaven, but they won't let him into the pearly gates until he proves himself to be a better person than the man he was on Earth. He gets one chance to go back and try and do good. So Billy returns to Earth, essentially 17 years later, to see his daughter all grown up. This is the part of the show where we get the beautifully orchestrated Rodgers and Hammerstein ballet, a la What Happened in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. But where Oklahoma was sort of where the ballet in the second act of Oklahoma is sort of a loose interpretation of what the story elements that are going on in that show. What's nice about Carousel is that the ballet in the second act is really genuinely part of the story. Billy sort of watches his teenage daughter experience different problems, mainly being that her father was, a no good, thief, and she's trying to deal with, having a single mom, that kind of stuff. So he doesn't do a particularly good job of imparting any wisdom to his daughter. But he goes to his daughter's high school graduation, where he is finally able to speak through a parson who's essentially giving the graduation speech. And Billy sort of is able to impart what little wisdom he has to his daughter so that she'll have a better life than him. End of play. Yeah. Carousel is really unique. Despite its unique plot, it is, of course, exceptional Rodgers and Hammerstein music that we get to experience throughout the evening. This particular revival is exceptionally well cast. We've got, Jessie Mueller. Jessie Mueller plays Julie Jordan. She is gorgeous and wonderful. And Joshua Henry is Billy Bigelow. Also, Lindsay Mendez. She won a Tony Award. She plays Julie's best friend, Carrie. This was... I've never really taken to Carousel particularly, although there are some very famous songs that come from this show. There's the movie version, which I've never really quite connected with. But seeing it, live and on stage with the exceptional choreography by Justin Peck.
Yes.
It really came to life, and it's like, oh, I get it. Carousel is actually really good.
And we can't ignore in the cast either Renee Fleming.
Of course.
The famous Met opera soprano who was here and got the signature song of the show, You'll Never Walk Alone, to quite stunning effect. The plot of this show was like, what? It's like, I don't understand quite what I'm seeing here. But the show worked for me beyond its plot because, as you noted, it is exceptionally cast. It was amazing to hear Jessie Mueller in particular use this more operatic side of her voice. Because typically, I think the two shows I've seen her in before, Beautiful, the Carole King musical, and Waitress, don't use that part of her voice at all. And here it was like, whoa, listen to that. And I do love some good choreography, and the Justin Peck choreography was off the charts. Amazing. And he got his well-deserved Tony for that choreography as well. So yeah, I loved our theater trip.
I did too.
It was good, and I like that we had sub-themes. Carousel, no gay, no nudity, all revival, and 2 acts.
Yes.
So we capped it with 2 acts. Moving on to a little bit of TV that we've seen recently. Man in an Orange Shirt, which was part of Masterpiece airings on PBS over June. Tell us about this amazing movie.
It was essentially a short series. It's 2 one-hour episodes. The first hour is about Michael and Thomas. They meet during the Great War, World War II, and they fall in love, and eventually they go home to England, and they have a brief affair when they first return, but Michael eventually decides to get married, and he marries a girl named Flora. And that first hour is sort of about their relationship, how Michael starts building a respectable, quote-unquote, life with Flora, while still pining for Thomas. And it's really about Michael realizing that the person he's genuinely in love with is the man he met in Europe. Thomas ends up becoming a rather respected painter. Michael is a respectable banker. And at the end of the hour, we see that they've, through circumstances, chosen not to be together. As the second hour begins, we jump forward in time, and we see Adam, who is Michael's grandson, and sort of what his modern, how his modern gay life sort of mirrors his grandfather's. Adam is a vet, and he sort of works with animals during the day and then goes out and tricks with various guys at night. And though he is also in his own way struggling with being his true authentic self, just the way his grandfather did. Now, Adam lives with his grandmother, Flora, and Flora gifts him with the family cottage. It's been essentially abandoned, and it's incredibly run down, and she gives it to him and says, you do with it what you want. He goes and visits and takes, I'm trying to think of the word, a friend who is a
Not quite an architect. I thought maybe he was an interior designer. It was never fully discussed.
He's like architect-like. Anyway, he takes his friend Steve with him to go to this tiny little place out in the countryside and see what they can do with this tiny little cottage. And it's there that Adam sort of realizes that Stephen may, offer him the life that he has always wanted. And it's about how Michael's and Adam's journey kind of mirror one another, and how at the end of the series they sort of come full circle, and we realize how truly connected Michael and Adam actually are over the generations. So I thought this was both bittersweet but very hopeful and emotional. It's really exceptional production. I enjoyed it an awful lot.
Yeah, I did too. I thought it was, especially the first hour, was heartbreaking as you realized kind of what was reality in late 1940s England. It really was the reality much through into the 60s even. The entire and then to move into the modern era to see Adam struggling in the same way, being his authentic self, because he wasn't out to a lot of people, including his grandmother, who was wonderfully played in the more modern hour by Vanessa Redgrave. This was a really good piece. I'm glad we picked it up. We'll link in the show notes to some places where you can rent it or stream it or possibly still pick it up on pbs.com.
Man in an Orange Shirt, the title of the show, actually refers to a painting that Thomas does of Michael. And that painting actually ends up bridging the generations, and it plays a big part in Adam's self-actualization. Like I said, it's a tremendous show. I highly recommend everyone check it out. It is actually currently available on DVD and Blu-ray as well.
Oh,
so
excellent.
If you'd like to check it out that way, we highly recommend it.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned at the top of the show you didn't get much reading done in June, but you did do a little bit of reading right towards the end.
Yes, this past week when we returned home from New York, I promptly got sick. So while I was sneezing and coughing on the couch, I also happened to read a little bit, and I finished The Best Worst Honeymoon Ever by Andrew Gray.
Which might be one of the best Dreamspun titles ever.
The best worst Dreamspun title. So Best Worst Honeymoon is about a guy named Tommy who is left at the altar. He realizes that the guy he's about to marry is a real big jerk. So Tommy's best friend Grayson decides to take him on the planned honeymoon. They go to this beautiful tropical island, and they hang out at the resort and try to heal Tommy's broken soul.
Aww.
Grayson brings along his 9-year-old son, Petey, and sort of the three of them together kind of heal and become a family. This is essentially a friends to lovers story, because while they're on the island together, Tommy and Grayson finally, after all these years, realizes that they're truly meant to be together. Their idyllic paradise is briefly interrupted when the ex comes and tries to essentially extort some more money from Tommy. This guy's a total dick. But what's nice is that Tommy finally stands up for himself and sends this bad guy away so that he can finally have a complete life with Grayson and Petey. And as we near the end of the story, there is an unfortunate incident when they go snorkeling. Grayson is stung by a Portuguese man-of-war. Ouch! And while that normally wouldn't be a very big deal, Grayson has an allergic reaction that sends him to the hospital. So we've got some hurt comfort themes going on right there. And that's truly the moment where Tommy realizes, he can't live without Grayson and Petey in his life. And that's sort of the happy ending. he of course recovers,
Sure.
and they go back to the States and essentially live happily ever after. So I really, really enjoyed Best Worst Honeymoon Ever. It's pretty wonderful example of sort of friends to lovers plot line. I really enjoyed it an awful lot.
Nice. I'll have to pick that one up next time I go after a dream spun to read. So you could check out the show notes to pick up any of the books or the DVDs that we just mentioned. And of course, we've also got links to all the Broadway shows we supported. Or, yeah, I guess we supported them because we went to see them. And of course, if you do pick up anything through Amazon, you do help us out a little bit because we do use affiliate links. So that puts a few pennies into the pocket of the podcast. Mm-hmm. What is another way they could support the podcast?
Well, you can always help support the show through Patreon. For as little as 25 cents an episode, your pledge through Patreon helps pay for the cost of producing and distributing this very show. Now, if you go to Patreon and check out what we have on offer, you can learn that fans who pledge at the silver and gold levels will have the exclusive opportunity to ask questions of some of our upcoming guests. And also, all patrons have the option to have a personalized thank you sent directly to them. We also include a few little goodies whenever we send a thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, any month that our pledges cover our monthly production costs, we'll produce a special bonus show, especially for our patrons. We did this not too long ago. We started essentially a new segment. I think what we're going to do from now on is that once a month we're going to start taking a look at classics of gay cinema. This past June, as I mentioned, we took a look at Boys in the Band. Hey patrons, if you're listening right now, is there a classic gay movie you want us to take a look at and sort of explore?
Yeah. Let's hear about it.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment.
If you'd like to know more on how you can help support this show through Patreon, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast. That's patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast.
Did you know that podcasts love to get reviews too? Taking a moment to leave a review about the Big Gay Fiction Podcast helps us with the show's visibility online. Please take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a review. Your comments help other readers of gay romance discover this show. Thanks for helping us spread the word about the Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
So recently I had the chance to catch up with Brandilyn. As always, she's really become our audiobook contributor here because she does love her audio so much.
An aficionado.
Indeed. Yes, she is. She is the audiobook aficionado. And she's got a couple of great recommendations for us. I'm excited to welcome back Brandilyn to the podcast today. Welcome.
Hello.
It's been way too long since we talked about Rick Riordan.
Yeah, that's true. As a matter of fact, he's had a new book out since we talked. The third one in the Trials of Apollo, which was awesome, of course, came out beginning of May. So, anyway, but that's not what I'm talking about today.
Well, you said it was awesome, so you got your little plug in that was a good book.
This is true. Unfortunately, I have to wait a year for the next one because he does one book a year, basically. So,
all right. Well, your anticipation can build between here and there.
Yeah, something like that.
So you got two audios to talk to us about.
I do. I have two audios. They both came out within the last week or two. One of them is called North on Drummond by Casey Byrne. And Casey she's a dream spinner author, but this book is actually one that was originally with Lucid. And she just got the rights back since, Lucid died. And she brought it out, obviously, in ebook, but also in audio. And I actually won the paper copy of it when I was at RT. So when I saw it in audio, I decided to pick it up. And it's a new to me narrator, Darcy Stark. It's basically, it's a paranormal, but it's mostly a contemporary with some paranormal elements. One of the characters is a psychic. He doesn't start out that way. He starts out as a tarot card reader, but a head injury brings about some psychic visions. And of course, the other love interest is not a believer, we will say. So that's where most of the conflict comes. But there's some other, some exes and some uneducated family. They're supportive, they just don't know how to be supportive. So, and a little bit of a mystery. It's good. I won't say it's a light read, but it's not terribly, terribly angsty. And the narrator did an admirable job. There were a couple of times that, because there's an alternating point of view, so you do have to kind of keep up with that because the narrator is not the most adept at differentiating for you. Mm-hmm. But it's the way Casey wrote it, it's pretty easy to tell who's talking and whose point of view you're in. So yeah, it's just a little, or it's not a little, it's about 9 hours, but it's a good, contemporary / paranormal for those who don't want heavy paranormal, but don't want straight contemporary either. And then the other book that I listened to a few days ago, it is called Blood from a Stoner. It's by L.A. Witt, and I wasn't sure what to think of it before I started it. I generally enjoy L.A. Witt's stuff. It tends to be a little more filled with sex than I always like to read, but it's also it's very, very much she's very quality. She's very adamant that her stuff is quality, and it is. And this one is narrated by Nick J. Russo, who is one of my favorite narrators. And it's a short, I think it was about a 4-hour audiobook, and it's mostly just a fun little audiobook. It's a vampire and the love interest / feeding toy.
Feeding toy.
What was you gonna say? Anyway, he's, let's just say, a little stoned the first time that we meet him, and the first time he's fed off of. And since they live in Seattle, so it's all legal, and so it's a little bit of fun. You get a high vampire, but it's not all the weed. There's other things, and there's love involved and stuff, but it's very lighthearted. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's a good what I call palate cleanser. You just read something really serious. It's a good one for that. And as always, Nick does a fabulous job. So those are my two latest audiobooks.
Fantastic. I'm very curious about Blood from a Stoner, because Stone Vampire just sounds very interesting to me.
I talked with L.A. Witt about it at RT, and honestly, it's not one I would have thought to pick up. But she talked about it because it came out while we were at RT, or right after we got back from RT. And I'm like, okay, because, like I said, it's a short little one, short being, 4 hours, but, it was fun. It's lighthearted. It doesn't take itself seriously. And, oh, come on, you have a high vampire. How else are you going to get a high vampire, but a high, meal? So,
exactly.
And like I said, it's all Seattle, so it's all legal.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a couple of great picks for us. We'll link up to all those things in the show notes so people can give them a listen.
As always, it is wonderful to have Brandilyn on the show. Thank you for stopping by, Brandilyn.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you again really soon.
I think that'll do it for this week's episode. We've certainly done a lot of talking.
We did. Had lots to say, all kinds of good theater stuff going on.
So coming up next week in episode 144, as we mentioned earlier, Jennifer from Coastal Magic will be here, and she'll talk about the 2019 convention, plus why you should register for it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all of that, and so looking forward to going this time, finally.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So, guys, remember, no matter where life takes you, the journey will always be sweeter when you have a book. So until next time, everyone, please keep turning those pages and keep reading.
For detailed show notes and the complete episode backlist, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday on all major podcast distributors and YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.